الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم أما بعد. The last two talks that we heard are actually incredibly inspirational, and I am not going to give you one of those talks today, but what I do want to give you is a little bit of mental prep before I begin. I think, what I want to share with you, I find it extremely important that Muslims have some background at least in context. So I'm going to be talking to you about something that's going to take a lot of brain juice, but at the same time, I respect the fact that you've been sitting here all day and are pretty exhausted mentally, so make dua that I'm able to be clear to you and you're able to stay with my train of thought. Now, the only reason I'm giving you this introduction is because when I ask you a rhetorical question, and this is how I teach, I don't just ask a question for the sake of asking a question. I ask you a question and I expect you to give me a response in as loud a voice as possible, simply to indicate that you are still alive. That's the only way I know that you're still breathing, so that I'm going to ask you a number of rhetorical questions as I go, and I will only be able to continue if you're able to keep up with me. I think I can wrap this up within a half hour, I hope. Don't hold me to that, but I'll try my best, inshallah ta'ala. We heard some things about the incredible Islamic history, some perspective from Islamic history. We heard some things about the incredible perspective from the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But I want to start today's talk, inshallah, with European history. Some things from European history and some perspective that all of us need, at least some background in order to understand the problem that we're facing in our time. So I take you back to European history when there's a revolt in Europe against the authority of the church. If you don't know about that, well, the summary of it is church policy in Europe. Europe was a religious society. It was dominated by the church, and church policy was extremely oppressive. The word of the Pope was equivalent to the word of God. Disagreeing with the Pope was basically what you would call an act of kufr. You were a murtad, you are no longer a believer, and you must be executed. The only way you can be cleansed of the sin of disagreeing with the church is you have to pay with blood. You have to be tortured and killed. And you're not just killed, you are tortured and then killed. That's the only way to save your soul. In that environment, Europe had been oppressed by this religious doctrine for long enough a time that two movements sprouted. Two movements came out almost at the same time. One of those movements is the Protestant Reformation. The idea that now, and because the church said that the average Christian has no business reading the Bible. They're not supposed to be reading the Bible themselves. That will come from the Pope or from the authority, the hierarchy, and they will not only read the Bible, they will also be the ones to interpret the Bible. And their interpretation is not subject to question. The Protestant movement says, no, every Christian should have direct access to the Bible. They should be able to read it for themselves, figure it out for themselves. We don't need the church to tell us this. So this, revolt against the authority of the church begins, and that is this is a 8th grade, 7th grade, elementary school version of the Protestant movement. Now, at the same time, yet another movement comes forward, and even a more powerful one, and these two are related to each other. The second movement that comes forward essentially says that the church has been teaching a doctrine that doesn't make any scientific sense. These people burn books of philosophy, books of science, anything that disagrees with their doctrine, like the earth is the center of the universe. That's the biblical claim, at least from the Catholic side. How can we accept the earth is the center of the universe? There's scientific discovery going directly against that now. We cannot accept this faith. And as a reaction to that, the church considered this scientific inquiry kufr, disbelief, so they burnt down libraries and killed people of science and killed people of philosophy. So there's this, the essence of the French Revolution, which is the undercurrent of which is the Catholic or the Christian doctrine. Number one, it is oppressive, and number two, it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. We need to come to what makes sense, which is science, which is philosophy, which is logic, rationale. And so there's this revolt against the church from both directions. From the religious direction, the Protestants, and from the scientific, secular direction, this other revolution that takes place, that removes and eliminates the authority of the church. Now, once this revolution takes place in Europe, and it's one of the bloodiest revolutions in world history, once this revolution does happen, now all of a sudden, Europe is a free-thinking society. They are rediscovering what they should believe in and what beliefs they should hold on to and what thoughts, what ideas should be at the center of that society. It's an open marketplace of ideas. So this is a time where a number of philosophies came out of Europe. A number of scientists, actually the earliest scientists in Europe were some of their biggest philosophers. So philosophy and science to them was actually hand in hand. And there were not one, but many, many different kinds of philosophies that were clashing against each other in this open marketplace of ideas. But, and this is where I need you to pay attention now, there is one common thought that dominated in the end. One common line of thinking, even though there are variations that are small here and there, one trend in European thought won in the end. And eventually, not only did it remain in Europe, it made its way to the entire planet. And today, the world we live in is actually still facing the repercussions of that idea, or these sets of ideas. So I'm going to try to explain these brief ideas to you before I give you something from Surah Al-Qiyamah. It was supposed to be from the beginning, the ayat of Surah Al-Qiyamah, but I want to set the scene a little bit for you first. In pre-modern society, most societies in the world, if not all societies in the world, were dominated by religion. All society, well, it doesn't matter which religion, whether it's the Hindu religion, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam. In pre-modern society, most societies had some kind of religious doctrine. And in religious societies, religious teachings are the most important thing. Science is not the most important, business is not the most important. The most important thing, the highest kind of credential, is the religious leader. So in ancient societies or pre-modern societies, the priest or the minister or the imam or the alim, right? Or the spiritual guides of the Hindus or whatever, these are the most important people. They hold a very high caliber in society. And what do you learn from these people? You basically learn three things. You learn to emphasize three things. You learn to emphasize God. We're not talking about Islam yet, so I'm not saying Allah, not yet. But you learn to emphasize God. Now, for different religions, that means different things. It could be multiple gods, or it could be one God, or it could be, an entire mythology of gods, whatever it may be, but some kind of unseen God. That is the first emphasis. The second emphasis is on the soul. So human beings have a body, but they also have a soul. And across religious traditions, you will find there's an emphasis on the soul. Somehow there is this unseen, mystical, mysterious part of ourselves that is inside of ourselves, and it must be saved. So there's God. Now you tell me, there was number one, there was God, and what was number two? The soul. And number three, there is some concept of an afterlife. There is something that is going to happen after this world. Whether it's you're going to be resurrected as a tree or a bird, or you're going to go to heaven or hell or whatever it may be, but this is not the only life. There is more to life than this. There's more to existence than this. So across all the different religions, three things get emphasized. God, you tell me now, God, and what else? The soul, and what else? And afterlife. Is that true of Islam also? It is actually true of Islam. It's true of Islam as well. Now, this revolution in Europe happens, and they say that we have in Europe also under the church, we've been emphasizing God, we've been emphasizing the soul, we've been emphasizing the afterlife, but this life is horrible. Look at what the church has done. All this time we've been thinking about God. We were thinking about the wrong thing. We should have focused our energies and thought and our intellect on the universe. We should have been thinking not about God, but about the physical universe. Okay, if you're not going to think about Allah, you're not going to think about God, what's the next biggest thing? It's the physical universe. We should have exhausted ourselves trying to understand the physical universe. And actually, the little that we have tried to understand, it has brought about a lot of benefits. Like when you study the physical universe, which is basically science, right? When you study the physical universe, you get discovery. And what does discovery do? It makes the world a better place. It brings about different kinds of invention, different kinds of utility. You cannot have that unless you study the physical material universe. So they say people that have been studying God, look what they've produced. And the people that study the universe, look what amazing things they're starting to produce. Look at the machinery we're able to build. Look at the advances in architecture. So we need to put our energies and our attention on the physical universe as opposed to what? God. What was the second emphasis? I ask you again just to check if you're alive. The soul. What is this soul? Has anybody even seen it? Can you even tell where it is? We're so worried about the soul, but what about all the diseases in the world? What about better nutrition? What about this physical body? So the emphasis needs to be shifted from studying the soul to studying the body. So look at the last few centuries. Has the human body been studied more than ever before in human history? Absolutely. Has the physical universe been explored, materials on this earth and beyond, ever before than human history? Absolutely. So God got replaced by the universe, and the soul got replaced by the body, intellectually speaking. So the highest learners of a society used to learn about God, and they used to learn about the soul, and now the highest learners of society are PhDs in science or medicine, right? They're the highest intellectuals. What was the third one? It was God, soul, and what else? Afterlife. Life will be good in heaven. Life will be good. You suffer here, and it'll be good in heaven. What do the Europeans say? We're tired of this. We don't want the life in, I don't even know if there is one. We need to emphasize the life of this world. Let's see how we can make this life better. Let's explore political science. Let's explore sociology. Let's explore anthropology. Let's explore public relations. Let's explore all of these humanitarian or human sciences that can make society a better place so we can govern ourselves and live better. And by the way, the more they studied these things, the more they studied,